This is 3000 NFL Mock Draft, a weekly college football slash NFL draft slash Seahawks slash rookies slash NFL podcast hosted by Kenneth Arthur, which is me of fieldgoals.com, and Rob Staten, which is my friend from across the pond ever at who runs SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Rob, how's it going today?
Well, I'm still a little unsure what happened yesterday. But I think the great thing is, Kenny, is that we've got this great silver lining with the Seahawks season going the way it is that the more the Seahawks lose, the more people are going to listen to our NFL draft podcast.
No, that's true. That is a very good point. The draft is becoming more and more important every week. The Seahawks did fall to 2-4, which, I can still remain optimistic about the playoffs and them not picking in the top 10 and that kind of stuff. Though there isn't very much of a chance, I think, at this point that they are going to be in that bye week city that they've had for the last 2 weeks. 12-4 is their best possible record, and I don't think that's going to get it done this season. But we'll talk more about that with our guest, who is well known by everybody, I think, that has listened to 3000 NFL Mock Draft. Danny Kelly. What's the name of your website again, Danny?
It's called Field Goals. It's similar to Field Goals, but with a Gulls.
Oh, okay. So a gull would be a bird of prey.
Well, I don't know about that.
A bird of play, maybe.
What do seagulls? Do they prey on stuff? I think they just eat like shells and shit. I don't know.
They prey on breadcrumbs and such.
It's just anything that they can get in the garbage.
Sort of like the St. Louis Rams. That would be the seagulls prey on the breadcrumbs of the Rams. See, we can still have some fun and take some digs out there, everybody. Danny, obviously this is a mock draft college football podcast. You, I know from experience as well, that when you pay attention and you write about the NFL, it can be very difficult to spend a whole lot of time watching and following college football.
Yeah.
How much do you know about the 2015 college football season?
I don't know much at all, to be honest. I usually wait until after the season ends to kind of start researching individual players. So in other words, I don't really follow teams in college football very closely. I don't know the depth charts of anything or whatever. But I follow peripherally in terms of some of the top guys that are expected to go in the draft next year and everything. But I really don't get in depth until after the season starts, and I can have the bandwidth to start really studying, like draft breakdown videos and things like that. So
yeah, obviously you do spend a lot of time in the first part of the year looking at draft prospects, like you just said. That means that you wouldn't know so much about the 2016 class, but you do have a lot maybe of favorites and guys that you liked from the 2015 draft, guys that you paid a lot of close attention to. Is there anybody that you can recall from that draft that maybe some of your favorite rookies that you've been watching around the NFL, guys that you have been impressed with already after 5 or 6 games?
Yeah, and I mean, when I'm studying the draft, I don't really get super into like the top 10 type guys because they're kind of generally just gonna go where they go, and the Seahawks are usually drafting near the end of the draft, each round, so I don't really pay close attention to it. But I think Amari Cooper has been as good or better than advertised, and that's been pretty cool to see. He looks like a polished like NFL receiver already, and he started out really hot, and so that's been cool to see. The other guy that comes to mind is Matt Jones in Washington. He was a guy I talked to at the Combine. And he kind of flew under the radar a little bit. I think people thought he'd be like a 5th rounder or something like that. And he had some limitations to his game, but the way he runs with so much power and just authority, I think that's really showed up in the NFL so far. And he got off to a really fast start for them, but he's kind of tapered off a little bit over the last couple of weeks. But
yeah,
he looks kind of like a guy that could be a lead back for them eventually once the season's over and whatever happens with Alfred Morris going forward. I think he could potentially replace Morris in that lineup, and he looks really good. So
yeah,
that's another guy that comes to mind.
Let me fold in Rob here with a question that pertains to rookies as well as transitions us into talking about the Seahawks. and then we'll have this roundtable discussion, I suppose. Rob, I want to ask you about Tyler Lockett because obviously through the preseason and the first couple games of the year, his kick returning and punt returning ability was so explosive. It seemed like something not only that we had never seen in Seattle, but was rarely seen ever in the NFL. Over the last 4 games or 3 or 4 games maybe, I want to say that while his ability, I would not question that, that I'm not going to be so quick to judge his ability. How do you feel about his decision making though? Because he takes the ball, he's so good that he sort of makes decisions where you can't believe that he catches, that he doesn't take certain fair catches, or that he's running the ball out of the end zone from no matter where he is.
I suspect he's given a bit of a free will to make those kind of decisions, and that he's almost encouraged to try and create something, because the one thing that is going to guarantee that Tyler Lockett does not return a kick, a touchdown or a big gain, is if he just fair catches it. So, or takes a knee. And I think that Pete Carroll probably tells him, look, if you feel like your instinct is telling you to take this and try and run it back and make some magic happen, then do it. I think the big issue is that in the first few weeks, the blocking was fantastic, and we've talked, and I think Danny's been on a few of the podcasts where we've talked about the quality of Tyler Lockett is really down to the fact that if he gets the kind of blocking that he needs, he can really exploit it and take it to the house. If he doesn't get the blocking, he is not Cordero Patterson. He is not Devin Hester, who's just going to make something happen through sheer, raw, insane creativity. So the blocking has gone off a cliff a little bit in the last couple of weeks. They're not really creating any kind of a crease for him. Other teams are really getting to Lockett before he has a chance to get in his stride. And if the Seahawks want to get anything out of their kick return game, they're going to have to do a better job blocking.
Yeah. Danny, your thoughts on Lockett's returning ability?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Rob. It's been really impressive so far. I think that the blocking is crappy lately. Like yesterday, I kind of joked around on Twitter. Like there was several occasions where Lockett looked like he was going to get chopped in half because there was like 3 guys running at him unblocked on several returns where he hits like the 10-yard line and he's just getting sandwiched. So, I don't know what's going on with the blocking. He got up one time and kind of like showed his frustration sort of at his teammates, I think, at that point. And so that was kind of interesting. But I don't know. He's explosive and decisive. And those are 2 really important things when it comes to the kick returner position. And I think he's shown that when he gets a crease, he hits it hard and he doesn't hesitate and he just goes. And so, he has the foot speed and the quickness to get the angle and outrun guys. And that's really, been the strength of it. So hopefully they can clean up some of the blocking and give him a few more chances going forward.
Let's open this up to a discussion about the Rob, can you mute your mic real quick?
I was actually muted there. I think it might be Danny that needs to mute his mic.
Okay, I was getting an echo, but it sounds like it's gone now. Maybe that was...
Yeah, I heard that too, but I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just a weird thing that happens. All right, everybody. You're listening to 3000 NFL Mock Draft. Let's open this up to just a discussion about the Seahawks and just overall. They're 6 games in. They're 2-4. They've held the lead in the fourth quarter in all 6 games. They really probably should have won. They should be no worse than 4-2, maybe probably 5-1, and they're 2-4. Let's just say there's 10 games left. If they want to make the playoffs, they probably need to win 8 of their last 10 games, get to 10-6. If you look at the NFC right now, I think that a 10-6 team probably will be the second wild card. There may be a tiebreaker somewhere in there, but I don't think that it's going to be 11-5 or better when you look at the fact that right now the Minnesota Vikings hold the second wild card at 3-2. There's a lot of teams that are losing or 500. So for them to make the playoffs, I think 8 of their last 10 would be realistic. 7 of the last 10 would be a stretch. Danny, what do you think right now then is the likelihood of the Seahawks either, what's more likely, that they'll make the playoffs or that they will be picking, in the top 20?
Well, I mean, I think when you're talking about likelihood, I think it's more likely they miss the playoffs. I think I saw a stat today. There was like 8% of teams who start out 2-4 end up making the playoffs. according to history or whatever. But I do think the Seahawks have the potential to get hot and start stringing together some wins. But I do think that right now the odds don't look good in their favor. I think the way they've played, the way they've kind of folded every fourth quarter in the last month and a half is really disconcerting, and I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if it's it's a lot of everything. It's like the offense can't finish, the offense can't put together drives when they really need to in the fourth quarter, the defense can't hold, they can't, for some reason they end up giving up these big plays and making huge mistakes at the most inopportune times. And their special teams haven't been as good over the last couple of weeks either. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's definitely possible, and I'm not ruling it out or anything at this point though. But I just think the odds are stacked against them. I think they really have to do what they did last year, which is turn the corner and really change completely. And it's possible, and they did it last year. But there's so many variables in the NFL. If they can stay healthy though, they have a chance. Just like any other team, they could start rattle off. I think you're right. I think they have to get to 9 or 10 wins at least. So you're talking about a very slim margin for error going forward.
Yeah, winning the next 2 road games will pretty much, I think, reset everything back to 0. But they do have to win these next 2 games. Rob, your thoughts?
It's hard to say because we're going to find out a lot in this next game. I think that the Dallas game, whether it's Matt Castle or Brandon Whedon or whoever starts that game, it is a game that the Seahawks really should win in a non-intimidating atmosphere that is Jerry World. So you're going to find out about the game against San Francisco. They beat Baltimore fairly handsomely yesterday. San Francisco were the kind of team that the Seahawks should beat. They are better than San Francisco. If they can't get a win in this game, and it's not going to be easy, it's going to be a bit of a war, I think, because both teams really need it. And San Francisco will be feeling, hey, if they win this game, I think they get up to 3-4. So they'll feel like they're recovering a little bit there. So both teams are going to really want it. If the Seahawks can get a grind out a win in this one, then they've got a good chance at Dallas, getting a 4-4, and things are looking a little smoother. There is so many little things that are going wrong. There are, I tried to think yesterday, what is the issue? What are the sort of the 3 or 4 issues? And there are so many different things. Whether it's Seattle's just thoroughly inept performance in the red zone, which I'm not sure. I mean, they had a whole offseason that was an issue. They bring in Jimmy Graham, and they still can't solve that problem. They seem to have these fluctuating fortunes with third down. They have this almost inevitable feel at times on defense that you just see a team get ahead of steam early in a drive, and you just know that it's going to go for an 80 or 90-yard down drive, and it's almost like you just sit there and within a flash it's happened and they've scored a touchdown. We saw it 4 times by. And these are very difficult things to work out in the middle of a season. Having said that, there are still a lot of positives that you see out there, and we see flashes of brilliance from Cliff Averill and Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor, and that still gives you encouragement. Russell Wilson is playing really consistent football, just within enough, and doesn't seem to be clicking right now. It just seems to not really want to know, doesn't really know what it wants to be. Marshawn Lynch is back, and you know what you're going to get from him. So there are still positives there. And hey, look, worse teams than Seattle have got out of trickier situations than this. But I will disagree one thing, though. I think that it is possible that final wild card spot could be a bit of a bun fight. Could be sort of like a 9-7, 10-6 team that gets through. So they've got to win the NFC games now. They've dropped one yesterday. Win the NFC games. Try and get up to 9-10 wins, and you never know.
Yeah, I think that it's really the I can't recall ever really seeing an NFL team and sort of equating it to having a baseball team where you don't have a good closer. So you know that even if you're up 9-6 going into the 9th inning, you feel absolutely no confidence. And now that's where we're at, with the Seahawks. It's like, Rob covers soccer, which is like if you get a 1-0 lead in soccer, the game is pretty much over. That's it, But it's like if you have, I just don't know what the Seahawks can do, but I do know that, they need to find out whatever it is that is because and I would say that this particular game, I feel like this one went on the coaches a little bit more than it went on the players. I thought that the way that they played in the second half was so reactionary to their consistently blowing it in the fourth quarter that it ended up actually being worse for them in the long run. And I thought that their management, their misuse of timeouts, in my opinion, at the end, where they could have, I think, had a couple minutes. There was no reason for them to keep the timeouts. There was no reason for them to think that Carolina was going to run out of time. There was never really an issue with the clock. The only thing that mattered would be how much time would be left on the clock if the Seahawks got the ball back. And if you have a drive at your own 9, again, we all wanted Tyler Lockett to run it out and return the touchdown, but he only got to the 9, and you're there with 29 seconds. It's hopeless. It doesn't matter if you have 3 timeouts. If you have 2 minutes left and no timeouts, that's what they train for. So I thought that was a misuse of time. But at the end of the day, it does put them in a position now where they're going to be perhaps, if they get in a really big lull, find themselves perhaps in one of these weird 6-10 seasons. It's something that we have to consider. Rob, I know that you had mentioned on your that people on your website were talking about whether or not it would be a good idea to just at this point get an earlier draft pick and get a big name player, something that they haven't done in the draft since 2010. I know that sounds. I've always thought that was a stupid idea. Let's go back to Danny. This is the first time that maybe you're hearing it. I'm sure maybe you've heard it on Twitter. The idea that the Seahawks would be better off, let's say, going 5-11 or 9-7, missing the playoffs. What do you think is better?
I mean, better off? Like, I don't really understand. I don't understand how that makes them better off if they don't make the playoffs. Like, I think the goal is to make the playoffs, right? So, at this point, I still don't think it's an impossibility. I think that with the way that the season is shaping out, league-wide, it's very top-heavy, so that gives Seattle a chance to kind of come back and sneak into the playoffs. So I just don't – I don't know. I like punting the season. Like, that just doesn't really register for me. Like, I don't really understand that point of view. I think, the idea is get to the playoffs and then anything could happen. So, I'm not.
Right, and I mean, we could go back to 2010 when the Seahawks and the Rams played in the final game of the year. For the winner would be going to the playoffs. A lot of people wanted the Seahawks to lose that game,
Right.
So that they would not make the playoffs and that they would get a higher draft pick, than the Rams, who would be picking again in the top 12 or whatever. And Charlie Whitehurst comes out. They win that game, and it gives them a home game against the Saints. It gives us the greatest play in Seahawks history.
Yeah.
The next year they draft, James Carpenter, which is not a great pick, but look at what's happened in the last 4 years. Who's had a better last 4 years, the Seahawks or the Rams? So I think that actually winning and proving that you are, worthy is much better than picking 10, 12 spots higher. And it's not going to matter if you keep on picking bad players in those spots.
I can
Rob?
understand if you're like going for like the number 1 pick, like if you have two wins or something. I can understand that, but at this point, I think it's way too early to talk about that.
Definitely.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Rob, I know you had some thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think the suggestion was from some people on the blog was that it wouldn't be the end of the world if they got an early pick. Not so much that the team should tank the season or that anybody should be hoping that it would be a consolation. But I don't think that would be a good thing at all, really. Even if it was like at least they've got an early pick. This is a championship window for Seattle, and I think a lot of people mistakenly think that it's a never-ending window like the New England Patriots with Tom Brady or even Aaron Rodgers at Green Bay, Manning in Indianapolis, that they're going to have sort of 6, 7, 8 seasons where they get 10 to 12 wins, get buys in the playoffs, and are constantly contending for multiple. I don't see it that way at all. I think the Seahawks are more built in the manner of a Pittsburgh or a Baltimore, which means that they're going to generally be competitive most years, but every now and again they're maybe going to have that, an 8 and 9 and 7 season under in the Joe Flacco era and won a Super Bowl. The Steelers have had 3 8 and 8 seasons in the Roethlisberger era and a 9 and 7, but they've also had a lot of winning as well. They've won a couple of Super Bowls. So that is how the Seahawks are. They seem to be with the current group in maybe a 2 or 3 year window. And the reason why I would suggest it's as little as that is because 3 key pieces might not be here in 2 or 3 years. Marshawn Lynch, Cam, and Pete Carroll. Lynch is, it really is sort of 2-3 years max for Lynch. Chancellor, is he going to? There's a reason why he's holding out, wanting to get this money pushed forward, and it's not because it could even be that Chancellor and Lynch kind of retire at the same time in the next 2 or 3 years. And Pete Carroll, I think it's fantastic news that Pete Carroll has totally rubbished this speculation about USC in his press conference.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just gone. That talk has gone. And it needed to be sort of nipped in the bud straight away, and I'm glad that he's done it. But how much longer is he going to, want to be coaching at this elite level in the NFL before he maybe sees another project, whether it's within football or out of football? So that is why I see it as a smaller window than maybe some people think. So yes, it'd be nice to talk about top 15, 20 prospects, and for that to, the blog will be very interesting, and no doubt we'll have lots of great talk about draft picks and stuff like that. But it'd be a major disappointment if that's what we're focusing on in January instead of another playoff tilt, because you know what, it's win now or you don't, and I don't want this fantastic, so entertaining era of Seahawks football to be remembered by that stupid end to the last Super Bowl. I want it to be remembered by Seattle winning 2 or 3 titles, being the team of the decade, Pete Carroll being a legendary coach, and that's how I want it to be remembered. And year is a disaster for this team.
Yeah, and I think when people talk about stuff like Pete Carroll and USC, or when people talk about tanking, I know that maybe not too many people did talk about whether or not Pete Carroll should move on after the loss, and I think it's just a reminder that maybe not the vast majority, maybe the vast majority, but people are stupid, and these are some of the reactions that you get sometimes. And I would say young, because when I was young, I used to think things like that without really knowing a lot. So I think as far as the Seahawks go and the draft goes, it's way too early to talk about which player. It's not maybe way too early to talk which players, but at this point, I know for Danny especially, we're focusing on what's happening right now. But as you watch the team right now, what are some of? I know there's obvious is everyone's going to talk about the offensive line, but what are some of the obvious first, second, third round picks that you're thinking that Seattle needs to use next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with the offensive line, and then you get into things like, I think you can never have enough pass rush, and that's been one of the issues the Seahawks have had, in closing these games, is they can't get pressure on the quarterback late in games for some reason. It's like the pass rush turns off, even though they have some good pass rushers right now. It wouldn't surprise me to see them go that route again. I think eventually, the way that Thomas Rawls is playing is very encouraging, but at some point you're going to have to take another running back or 2, maybe sometime in the early mid-rounds. And then, still building out the receiving core going forward. Obviously, Doug Baldwin's contract isn't going to last forever. Jermaine Kearse is a free agent after this year. And so building that core around Russell Wilson will be important. And then continuing to upgrade the cornerback position, I think, is important. Just we've seen kind of how the teams have targeted Kerry Williams this year, and not having an option behind him like Darrell Simon because he's injured is kind of, a little bit daunting to think about. So those are the kind of things I initially, think about. And then obviously, like, strong safety is going to be important going forward because you don't know what Cam's deal is, and they didn't really have an answer for him when he was out, and obviously Deion Bailey is now with the Jets, and so that's not going to happen. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to really pinpoint one. I think obviously the offensive line is the big thing, though. I think that's, the number one priority in terms of most of the fans, and I don't know how the Seahawks look at it, but I should think that they see the issue that the poor offensive line is causing for them.
Rob, do you have any thoughts as far as what Danny said about the offensive line, but also as far as the next year's draft goes, whether or not they could be focusing, based on everything there isn't any one position on the offensive line that they don't necessarily need to address. So how would you rank center, guard, tackle? How do those positions look next year?
There's some very interesting options in the draft. I think the big thing is going to be what happens to Russell Okung. Are they going to have to replace him? I think this is the big dilemma that they face, because you don't have experience on the line. Are you really going to lose Okung and or J.R. Sweezy and then replace him with another rookie and just be faced with the same problem in a year's time? That doesn't seem attractive to me. To think that there may be a way to change the philosophy slightly on the offensive line and bring in a couple of proven veterans. Now, that might be expensive, or the options might not be there, but is there any way that John Schneider can, even if it's just to go and find the next Breno Giacomini or somebody who can hold down the left guard position for a year, even if it's just for one season, or a veteran center who can do it on a reasonable contract, or a right tackle, just to get a bit of experience in there. I'd like to see them maybe consider a bit more of a man scheme as well. I think the zone blocking scheme works very well in the run game, but not quite as much in pass protection, and I think that's part of the issue that Seattle has. If they do go with the draft, there's a lot of options there, but I like the way that Danny's talking, because I think we may talk about this a little bit more as we get closer to the end of the season, but some of the better options. Now, I love the Auburn left tackle, Sean Coleman, who I just think is the best offensive lineman, apart from maybe Laramie Tunsil at Old back in a couple of weeks. Sean Coleman is a fantastic player, and nobody talks about him. And he's not in any mock drafts, and he's not on any real watch lists or any big boards. Sean Coleman is ridiculously talented with a fantastic backstory. He's recovered from cancer. People need to start talking. He's there in the first round. Seattle needs to take him. They can play him wherever the hell they want. They can play him at left tackle, right guard, right tackle. He's just a fantastic player. But if they don't want to go in that direction, there's a lot of talented cornerbacks who are going to go in the first round. And hey, Seahawks they seem like they suddenly need some help at cornerback. There are receivers in the and that are going to go in the first round that are very, very interesting. There could be another 4 or 5 that go in the first round. So they're going to have lots of options there. So maybe there is a way for them to go veteran free agency to repair the offensive line, and then use the draft to go in different directions.
Yeah, we'll let Danny go here with just one more final thought. The Seahawks have to go to San Francisco on 3 days rest. It would have been nice to go in there with a win rather than really feeling like they can't lose. So any thoughts as far as the Seahawks being able to go down on the road? How concerned are you for this game on Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Seahawks, I agree with Rob. I think they're like a better team than the 49ers at this point. I think they should win by like all accounts, but I mean, I kind of felt that way about last week and it didn't happen. So it's sort of the old cliche, like, any given Sunday. Obviously, this is a Thursday night game in San Francisco, which makes it tough. But I think at this point it's really like kind of a must-win game. If you're wanting to get the season back on track, they kind of got to go down there and win this game, or else, it becomes a different dynamic. It becomes a different narrative, and then it sort of changes the whole complexion of the season. So this is an interesting one. It sucks that it's kind of a rivalry game on the road on a short week, but the good news is the Seahawks didn't really get many big injuries in this last game. They got banged up a little bit, but nothing major. And they're getting Bobby Wagner back potentially, and so that's good. And I think they're poised to go down and win a tough game, and I think they will. And I'm going to pick them in this game, but I still think it's going to be one of those ones where you're going into the fourth quarter pretty nervous about what's happening. So we'll see, but hopefully they can kind of shake off this lack of being able to finish.
Yes, we will see, and we will talk about that game on Real in the Field Goals Instant Reaction show Thursday night, so make sure to come back for that. Danny, what was the name
can I just say, that is a great show, by the way, and can I just, before we move on, can I just say that I have to work a very early shift at work on a Monday. I'm usually in at 5 in the morning, and the first thing I do when I get up in the morning and get ready is listen to the Instant Reaction podcast. And it helps me sort of get over the lack of sleep that I've had, sort of agonizing about the disastrous Seahawks performance the night before. So if anybody has not listened to the podcast, the Instant Reaction podcast. It's well worth checking out.
Thanks, Rob. That's awesome to hear. Honestly, it's been kind of funny because it's like a cathartic thing for Kenny and I think so far because, obviously the season started off kind of crappy, but it's been fun and it's kind of been a good way to decompress after the game. I think just for both of us, like commiserate a little bit and try and figure out what happened. But yeah, so it's been fun.
Yeah, it'd be nice to celebrate every now and then. So
yeah, seriously.
But it's been an interesting experience either way. Thank you, Danny. The name of the site again was what?
Field Goals with a GULLS.
.gov.
Yes. .XXX.
That'll be coming soon. All right. Thank you, Danny, for coming on to the show. And
all right.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. That was awesome.
All right.
Hey.
All right, Rob, let's get moving on to the second part of our show where we are going to go back to college football and the draft, starting with Twin Calf this week in NCAA football. And what a week, man. What a week it was. Can you sort of explain your reaction? I know you said that you got the game on British television, so can you explain sort of your reaction to watching the Michigan State game?
Yeah, I was really, really upset by that, and I think that every time that I'm going to see a game now in any form of football where there is just a horrific ending like that, it's just going to bring back all the pain of the last Super Bowl, and that's kind of how I felt because the expression on the Michigan fans' faces was very similar to what I was like pulling at my brother when the Seahawks lost the last Super Bowl. I just can't. There's a great clip. If people haven't seen this, go on social media and find it. A clip of like the sound from behind the goal as it happens with the Michigan fans. And it is just like there are screams like you're watching like Nightmare on Elm Street or something. It's just incredible. I mean, like we will never see. I mean, imagine all they had to do was snap the ball and punt it. And I think on the return, it probably would have been the end of the game. There was like about 10 seconds to go.
Yeah.
And even when he fumbles the punt, all he has to do is like, if he bounces on it, they're still going to probably win the game. Everything had to work against Michigan, and that's that. And like I've kind of come to like Jim Harbaugh as well. So like even the look of horror on his face brought me no satisfaction as well as it would have done like in the previous years. I actually felt sorry for the guy.
Yeah, I mean it's even President Barack Obama addressed it today, and
did he?
gave some condolences and advice to Jim Harbaugh on the University of Michigan. I think that just goes to show how awful it was. And I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't care who wins. Michigan State. I thought it's a cool story that Michigan had been on this run, and I thought that was a cool story. And I thought it was going to make for a big win that pushed them in the top 5, and then they set up for still the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. It's something interesting to watch every year, especially when they could possibly be 1-2. But the mostly than anything else, it doesn't make me feel good to see a team lose in that manner. If Michigan State beat Russell Wilson's team 5 years ago or whatever on a Hail Mary pass, and that's heartbreaking. That you had it right there and you lost it. But that's football. What happened to Michigan on Saturday, that was not very football-y. That was just you won the game. You did everything in your power to outbeat someone else. If you had punted it and they returned the punt for a touchdown, that's amazing football. That's the Deshaun Jackson against the Giants. That's something that, you will talk about forever. You'll also talk about this forever, but I don't like the way that it makes me feel. I don't like the way it goes down. I don't like seeing a bunch of people just be that devastated, because I know that, I've been in that position many times as a Washington State fan over these last, this 7-8 games of the Seahawks. None of it feels good. And if I don't have a dog in the fight, which I don't for really any other team that's not playing the Seahawks, then I just hope it goes down in a football way. And I don't think that was football. And it was all setting up for a really cool upset. And then it becomes a really fascinating disaster.
Can I just say that no sport like the NFL, college football, sort of American football in general, there is no other sport that kind of produces such like agony. And having watched a lot of British sports, like you were saying earlier, like a 1-0 scoreline in soccer, and that's the game done. More, like the Seahawks were, if you to compare it to soccer, they were kind of like 2-0 up last night with like 5 minutes to go and somehow found a way to lose, which just doesn't happen. So you don't generally have, you kind of know you're going to lose with about 20, 30 minutes to go in soccer, and you can kind of, you got to get used to the idea. Whereas like in American football, you kind of like, you've like still got that hope right until the exact moment when you're like, you've lost. And then it's just the most heartbreaking experience. And like, I don't know, it's a very stressful game to watch. Even when like, I don't care who wins between Michigan and Michigan State, but you can't help but feel bothered by what happened and the amount of like effect that it has on so many different people.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Even if you probably, like, I realized, like, for example, the Seahawks, the way that they lost to the Bengals, that was the first time they had ever lost like that in the entire history of their franchise. And I think the Bengals too. They'd never gone into the fourth quarter with a 17-point lead or vice versa and lost. So it's not common for it by any means. But like I was saying about a closer in baseball, I don't know, how much you follow the sport, but if you in certain times where it's like, oh, the Yankees are 72-0 this year when they're leading going to the ninth, like there's so little doubt. And football, I always feel like, to me, like an 18-point lead is the best possible lead, because I feel like if you're within 2 scores, like you can be within 2 scores, you can be up 16 points, which is basically blowing someone out, and still they can still come back and tie the game if they have the ball in 2 minutes or a minute left, because there's weird things have happened like that before. So that what makes it exciting, but I definitely don't like to see it go down quite like that. And when the Seahawks beat the Packers in the NFC Championship game, I didn't feel guilty necessarily, but I was like, oh man, you feel sympathy while you win. You feel empathy while you celebrate. So it's like,
it's kind of like a weird feeling, that game, wasn't it? It was like a weird relief mixed with like embarrassment and right. And then just kind of like the joy of knowing that you'd won.
Right, you were on that side, and then of course 2 weeks later the Seahawks were on the other side.
Yeah,
and over these past 6 games, it's not been much better. And like even then, like the Detroit Lions, they were the winless Detroit Lions are going to get a big win on Seattle on Monday night, and their fans, they just want something. They don't have a lot, and obviously they just want something, and they're 1 foot away from winning that game. And but at least with that, I felt like that was an impressive play by a player on the Seahawks. That was a play made by a player on the Seahawks. That wasn't a punter that basically flipped out. I know when he didn't have a much of a chance to catch the ball, at that point he just flipped out, because there was pretty much no chance that Michigan State was going to win, just because they had possession at whatever it was, like the 40. So it was going to be, again, another Hail Mary or a 60-yard field goal attempt or something like that. And it's a freak occurrence, and you just want there to be more, like, it feels nicer in life when you feel like there's some guarantee of safety. Then like, it just reminds you that life does not provide safety, that there is not a set of rules that says if you follow all of the rules and if you go through this path, nothing bad will happen to you. It's a reminder that said you can do everything right and bad things will still happen to you. And that's sort of what I saw in the Michigan State game. It's what I see with the Seahawks. It's a reminder, I guess. It can ground you, but at the same time, it still gives you a weird taste in the back of your mouth, for me personally.
It's kind of like it's kind of weird. It's almost like watching the sport is it's like the hits that you shouldn't really have, but you kind of need. And like every Sunday, you kind of need that sort of Seahawks game. But there's a chance that you're going to spend the next week just being in I'm speaking personally, just in a foul mood because of what you've witnessed. And I have 2 kinds of Seahawks games. I have the ones where I can just sit back and they're going to win, and there's like a comfortable lead, and you can just relax and enjoy it. And then there's the kind of pacing up and down the room, sort of just finding something to grab hold of while they conspire to throw it away last night. So it is what a great sport.
Yeah, it is fun. Moving on to another goings on this weekend, something that I don't know how many people paid attention. It's definitely not as high profile as Michigan State, but Memphis beat number 13 Ole Miss. And they did so, I think it was their first win over a ranked opponent since 1996. I think it was Ole Miss' first loss to a team outside of their division that wasn't in the top 25 since like 1976 or something, if I remember what it said on the television. I almost said telly because I'm talking to my old friend Rob here. But they did so behind the quarterback play of Paxton Lynch. It puts him on the map, really, for a lot of people, a week after Rob said right here on this podcast that Paxton Lynch was the best quarterback potentially in the 2016 NFL draft. And I guess, probably because he was on your radar, or very early, Rob, did you see a lot of people change? Obviously, he start shooting up all the boards that you saw this week?
Yeah, he's gonna start appearing on a lot of boards, and I didn't think it was his best game, to be honest. I know that statistically he was very, very good, but I think he's played better this year. But I think also Memphis used quite a conservative game plan, despite the sort of the gaudy numbers they put up. It was clear they felt like, look, we're taking on a top SEC opponent here. We're going to make sure that we don't turn the ball over. We're going to keep it sort of confined and not go to the outer layers of the playbook. And we're going to rely on our defense to help us along. And what a fantastic effort. Let's not underestimate what an amazing win this is. Ole Miss is loaded with NFL talent, and were one of the teams fancied to get to the SEC title game. They beat look, Ole Miss beat Alabama in Alabama this year, and Memphis have beaten them. And the only reason that Memphis have beaten Ole Miss is because they've got a quarterback like Paxton Lynch. He had one turnover his first of the year, which was on a tip pass. It wasn't his fault at all. Receiver should have had it. He was accurate throwing the ball. He did make some big plays. Never gave the Rebels a sniff of another turnover. On one play, it was very evident. They showed it on the replay. He went through 4 reads before delivering this inch-perfect throw of his back foot to the right-hand side. Velocity, converts a third down with that. First touchdown, real patience in the red zone, delivers a strike to the right corner. Second was a wonderful low throw through a crowded red zone. Really terrific play that only his receiver had a chance of making. And the third was a safe, deep shot, if you can have such a thing, on a back shoulder throw, which the defensive back had no chance of getting. He is the real deal. And this was a game where, like I say, he wasn't at his 100% best, but he still looked terrific. Teams are going to look at his frame, his athleticism, his elusiveness, his accuracy, and his upside, and they're going to say, yes, we can work with his skill set. And he has a chance to be, he's not Cam Newton, but teams will think, can we make him into sort of like a poor man's Cam Newton? And when they look at the other options in this class, and I think we said it last week, and when they look at the Connor Cooks, and when they look at the Jared Goffs and the Christian Hackenbergs and the Cardale Joneses, and I think that teams will ultimately decide that Paxton Lynch is a guy that they can win with. And I think he's going to go very early.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Memphis and Paxton Lynch is, you'd see this opportunity for them to play a team like Ole Miss, what some people would say is a quote unquote legit team, and they get the win, and Paxton Lynch has 3 touchdowns, and that they do everything that they was asked of them to do, and you would say, well, that's their one chance, because they play in the American Athletic Conference, a conference that I don't think a lot of people have heard of. I personally probably couldn't have told you what conference they played in before Saturday, but you look at the top 25, and all of a sudden, shockingly, there are 3 teams out of this conference in the top 25, including Temple, Houston, and Memphis. Another team, Navy, they're 4-1. The only team that they've lost to is Notre Dame. So Paxton Lynch is set to play against all of those teams. Can you sort of talk about what's going on in the AAC? How legit are these 3 teams?
Well, Houston have got a really, really highly rated head coach, and I think that there's a chance that he could end up being linked with USC, and they've got a team that has been pretty good for a while. I mean, this is Kevin Sumlin's old school, and they've just high production passing offense. Temple. I've not had a chance to see them this year, but you hear good things there. I don't think they're not going to last, but they're in the top 25 right now. And then you've got Memphis, and I think they all have to play each other, or certainly I think Memphis have to play. I think they have to go to Temple and to Houston as well. So it's going to be very intriguing to see these 3 teams come together. The Houston-Memphis game in particular will be fascinating. And people are this is going to be a nice test for Paxton Lynch. And while we sit here today praising him, let's see how he deals now with the pressure of expectation, and with a closer eye on him, and He's got people like Mac Brown in the studio saying, this guy's, he's going to be an NFL player and he's really good and he's going to have, if he Googles his name in the next 2 or 3 days, he's going to see it in every single mock draft in the first round. How is he going to deal with that pressure that comes with people now expecting him to win these games? So this is going to be a nice test for him, but he got a statement signature victory, which NFL teams are going to, again, that's another thing they're going to love. He's got that on his resume now. And as long as he doesn't have any horrible performances, Jared Goff had a 5-interception game against Utah, as long as he avoids any stuff like that, I think there's every chance that Paxton Lynch is going to be the first quarterback taken next year.
Moving on to the Pac-12, Stanford played UCLA on Thursday night to beat them 56-35. It puts them, back up towards the top of the Pac-12 conference in terms of, I think along with Utah, the teams that are serious threats to be legit best teams in the nation. But I thought what was really interesting was that I never knew that Ed McCaffrey had a son that played for the Stanford Cardinal. I mean, we had never talked about this guy on the podcast. I've never heard his name said before. He rushed 25 times for 243 yards, 4 touchdowns. It was the most in the nation this week. He now has 844 rushing yards, 6.5 yards per carry on the season. He also has 16 catches for 172 yards. And he also returns kicks as well, I believe, perhaps punts. Doesn't really look like a running back. I don't know if that's because he's white, and I'm just being serious about that. We don't see a lot of white running backs in the NFL anymore, and even in college. He's also kind of tall, framey. He looks more like a receiver like his dad. Do you know anything about Christian McCaffrey? Do you have any opinion on how he could place in the NFL?
Well, I did a bit more research on the back of this performance, where he was terrific. He seems to be a guy who's been written off at a number of different positions and has got his chance at Stanford and seems to have a bit of a chip on his shoulder. And he's just taking that opportunity. And he looked really, really good. And while you wouldn't say that he looks like, the prototype NFL running back, and I don't think anybody expect, he's not Leonard Fournette. He's not going to be somebody who gets drafted in the first round one day and ultimately, is a feature back for a team. But he looks like a guy who could have a role. And I think he's going to be a fun player to watch over the years. And I think the other thing from the game, there was 2 other sort of big things from that UCLA game, which wasn't shown live in Britain, but was shown on repeat the next day. There were 2 big things for it. One was the return of the Jim Mora stare, which was well received in the Staten household, because it reminded you that however bad the Seahawks are this year, at least you don't have to see Jim Mora staring blankly at his team from the sideline. And the other thing is, at least the Seahawks collapsed in the fourth quarter instead of the first 5 minutes of the first quarter, like they did in 2009. And the other thing was the catch by Owusu, which was just, we talk. There's so many crazy plays over the weekend. The Michigan State play being one of those. But how about that catch from Owusu in the Stanford game, where he basically caught it on the defensive back's back?
Amazing.
The thought of what has to happen for that to be a catch. It's just incredible. We'll never. I don't think we'll ever see a catch like that again.
One other leader this week was Leonard Fournette. He was 10th in the nation with 180 rushing yards. I'm just find it funny that you look at he's the nation's leading rusher, and he has 150 attempts. He's rushed for 1,202 yards, 8 yards per carry, and 14 touchdowns. We've talked a lot about Ezekiel Elliott of Ohio State and how he could be a Heisman candidate, top running back in the next year's draft. He has 2 fewer carries than Leonard Fournette, but he has 214 less yards. And this is the second best maybe running back in the nation. It seems so unique. I can't think of the last time that not only was the most hyped player in college football, also the best player in college football. Is that something that you think about? Can you think of the last time that the hype seemed to match the production in such an extreme way?
I think Andrew Luck is probably I know that he's a particular favourite of yours, Kenny. But I
Love
think.
him.
But when Andrew Luck was a freshman, one of the coaches at Stanford, I'm trying to think of it, may have been was Greg Roman there? I think it may have been him. He said that he was Brett Favre, or that he was going to prove to be as good as Brett Favre. And when you hear that, when the guy's a redshirt freshman, you think, well, that's an interesting thing to say. And while I don't think he's necessarily going to be Favre or whatever, but he certainly lived up to the hype in his college career. And Leonard Fournette is just, I mean, he is remarkable. Is there anything the guy can't do? And he just seems so pumped up to play for LSU, and I just cannot wait to see him in the NFL. And it will be intriguing to see if he goes the way of several of the high-profile running backs who just dominate in college and then don't do anything at the next level. But I just feel so confident that he's going to be such a playmaker in the NFL. And he's already a man and playing college football. Let's see how he deals with the other men that are playing the NFL, though. But I mean, he is some player, and I just cannot wait to see where he goes in the draft. And yeah, he is the best player. I know that Dana Holgerson tried to claim it was Corey Coleman of Baylor this week, said he's the best player in college football. And you can quote me on that. I think it was Dana Holgerson's quote. Well, I think Dana needs to watch Leonard Fournette play.
Yeah. I mean, to just this sort of production, the place that he could be going. And, LSU, by the way, he has 1,202 yards. LSU already postponed, delayed, canceled, whatever, a game this year. So he was supposed to play in another game, and he's got 200 more rushing yards than anyone else in the country. The last time I can really feel like that there was a guy that was this dominating at the position may be Barry Sanders. 1988, Oklahoma State rushed for 2,628 yards and 37 touchdowns. And obviously, won all the awards, goes into the draft the next year, 3rd overall pick. This seems like a place that Fournette could be going. You don't want to necessarily put that kind of pressure on one guy, but it seems like he's able to handle it so far. And I think we're all just sort of crossing our fingers and just hoping he gets to the NFL as soon as possible.
Well, the next his next game is a cupcake run against Western Kentucky, where he'll no doubt run for 1,000,000 yards again. 7th of November. LSU at Alabama.
Yeah,
there's a game,
and that's that could be the one where, yeah, I mean, he's already at this juncture. I realize there are teams ranked 1st, 2nd, 3rd. At this juncture, is there anyone else competing legitimately for the Heisman Trophy?
Yes, I mean, there's obviously Ezekiel Elliott will, while Ohio State are still winning, they have an opportunity there. Leonard Fournette, you will also possibly, I mean, depending on what Alabama do, Derrick Henry might get into the mix. But, if this is genuinely for the best player in college football, then it has to be Fournette, whatever happens the rest of the way. Robert Griffin won it when I think he had a couple of losses on the schedule, at least one defeat for Baylor. If this is about the best player, the best talent in college football, it's Leonard Fournette. Give him the trophy now. Let's just call it a day. Give him the Heisman Trophy because he deserves it.
Yeah. And also in the Pac-12 this week, Washington State, they came off of a win against Oregon. It seemed like they were setting, just the way that I felt as a fan, knowing like, here we go, we're going to play the worst team in the Pac-12 and lose. But Washington State thoroughly dominated Oregon State in the first half, then didn't look as good in the second half. What were your thoughts on Washington State this week?
I think it was disappointing for Washington, a bit of a letdown, and I thought that the USC game was a really scruffy game. And without wanting to upset any Washington fans, I've no doubt there will be a few listening to this. I think what happened subsequently after that game with Steve Sarkisian maybe just takes some of the edge off the win, and that maybe USC were ready and for an implosion, and maybe it was a good thing to have that loss to sort of get it all out in the open. Because this is a bad Oregon team, and oh wow, that Vernon Adams came back. I mean, he's not played well this year, and to think that was sort of the big difference, a big turning point for Oregon. It was a bad It was a bad day for Washington, no doubt. At home, Oregon, chance to beat them at last, didn't get it done. Washington State, on the other hand, just seemed. I like what they're doing there, Kenny, and I like the way the Leach system seems to finally be clicking. If it wasn't for that darn first game that they lost, was it Portland State or whoever?
Mm.
Yep. They'd have a trip. They'd be one game away from a bowl game now, and they've got a few more wins in them, and I think that one of them, they've got to be the favourite for the Apple Cup, and I think they're better than Washington this year.
Yeah, Washington State. This is what we have to cling on to as Cougs fans, but Washington State 5 votes in the coaches poll this week.
There you go.
On the people are talking a little bit about them, and that's also kind of frightening as well. But they have, I can't recall. They've got a couple games coming up that obviously you just want to win. Well, I know that if they win this week, there's talk. Now, do you know the tradition of the Washington State and College Game Day?
Yeah, with the flag?
Yeah. So that flag has been going at College Game Day for like 20-something years. I don't know. I don't know exactly how long it's been going, but it's been there every single College Game Day. They haven't missed one single Saturday. And College Game Day has never once come to Pullman. So they travel to wherever College Game Day is going to be, and it just so happens that the Cougs have never been in a position where they were both good enough that a game was happening in Pullman, that another top 25 team was coming into Pullman, and that there wasn't just a better place for College Game Day to go. So there's been a huge amount of loyalty from Wazoo to College Game Day. This weekend, the Cougs play at Arizona. If they win that game, and if Stanford, let's see if Stanford, who they play this week, if anyone. They might not play this week. So they don't play next week. So if the Cougs beat Arizona, they will go. Stanford will be coming to Pullman, ranked, probably 9th, 8th, or something like that. If the Cougs beat Arizona, there's a chance they could be ranked 25th or something like that. Rumor has it that if the Cougs win this weekend, there's a very good chance that College Game Day will come to Pullman for the very first time. How are the Cougs' chances of beating Arizona in Arizona this weekend?
Well, I watched UCLA at Arizona, and Arizona were poor. And UCLA just got them by the throat and never let go. So I think that it's going to be a high-scoring game, obviously, and it's going to probably come down to who can outlast, and it could be an absolutely huge score. It was like 56-52 or something ridiculous like that. But Washington State have got a chance, and when you look at the schedule, they should have beaten Portland State in the first game, and they had a chance to beat California. It's not ridiculous to think the Cougs could be unbeaten at this stage, and yet here they are. So let's hope they can beat Arizona, Kenny, and have that big day against Stanford, and they'll give Stanford a game.
Yeah, I mean, I would really hope so. Do you have any? Have you had a chance to actually watch much of the Cougs and as well as Luke Falk? Because I'm kind of curious how, because even in an air raid offense, maybe that means that the numbers don't matter, or whatever. That's fine. I'll accept that anyone in an air raid offense looks a lot better than they are. But I just want to know how you feel like who have been the best players within an air raid offense, and how do you think that Luke Falk maybe measures up to some of the other guys that have tried to run Mike Leach's offense?
I like Falk, and I haven't seen a game live, but I've seen a couple of games, and in particular watching Joe Dahl as the left tackle, who has had a good year. I don't think he's quite. I think maybe some people are getting a bit carried away with him and a bit too focused on him being a target. I think that he's a very solid player and he's going to go fairly early in the draft. But let's not get carried away or believe that he's the only pick the Seahawks can make. So I was watching him, but I kind of kept being drawn to the quarterback, and I just like what he does. And that's not, he's not going to be an early round pick. But I could see Falk getting a chance, on the third day with the team somewhere down the line, if not a little sooner. And I could see him getting a shot to make a team initially as a backup, but then you never know. Once you get in the building, you've got a chance there. And look, with a real limit of good quality quarterbacks coming out of college football, and with still some very good offensive minds in the NFL, you never know what he could do. So all the power to him, and I think he's got a future in the NFL.
Hey, that's good. The last one, Jeff Toole, he had a couple starts, maybe one start with the Buffalo Bills, completely out of necessity, and he was really bad. But the Cougs, they do have some tradition there, Drew Bledsoe. Hopefully Leach can get, at least some more guys into the NFL at any position and win some games. Just the final thing to talk about a little bit, you've got a full 32 for the first time, 32 players for a first round. Is this something that's now on Seahawks Draft Blog, or is this just exclusive for me?
This is just for you, Kenny. This is a brand new one today. I did put something similar up last week, but I wanted to modify it because there were just so many really impressive performances this weekend that it warranted a change. So I'm going to keep Laramie Tunsil as the top offensive tackle for now. He hasn't played this year. He's going to come back from his suspension soon. I want to give him the chance to prove that he's worse than Sean Coleman before I move Coleman a little bit further up. But look, I know I mentioned him with when Danny was with us a moment ago. Look, Sean, if you get a chance to watch Auburn play, watch the left tackle who moves to the right-hand side, Sean Coleman. I mean, the guy is a beast. Nobody is talking about him. He's got this really deep, sounds like Barry White when he talks, and he's just got this huge powerful frame. Loves to put people on the backside, in the block. Finishes his blocks. Loves to get to the second level. Finishes. When he wins, there was one play in the game the other day that Auburn won, where he stuck a guy on his backside and just sort of like you could see him chirping away at the player. I just love that kind of attitude in an offensive lineman. So many offensive linemen. They're kind of nasty in the blocking, and then they just get back to the line. And I want to see an offensive lineman who's like Richard Sherman, who I'm going to beat you. I'm going to physically dominate you, and then I'm going to remind you what I've just done. And that is what Sean Coleman does. He is going to be an absolute monster at the next level. If he doesn't play left tackle, he's going to play right. And if you kick him inside to guard, he's going to be one of the best guards in the league. He is so underrated. I've got him at number 6 in this top 32, and the 5 in front of him: Bosa, Kemdichi, Tunsil, Tre'Davious White, the God, and Jalen Smith. And that is it. They're the only 5 that I have in front of Sean Coleman. He's a fantastic player.
And this Sean Coleman, as you said, nobody's talking about him, but this is a guy. It sounds like the reason that he has flown under the radar was because of the time that he missed due to leukemia, because he goes to Auburn as the top-ranked player in all of Mississippi. He is the 3rd-rated offensive tackle by Rivals, ranks 22nd in the Rivals 100. Sounds like that's the type of thing where, a guy is flying under the radar, not because he didn't have a ton of talent all along, but just hadn't got a chance to showcase it. Played in behind Greg Robinson in 2013. And, that's kind of another guy that I was thinking about as you were talking about him. Maybe it was because of Auburn, but it sounds like, I recall people not talking about Greg Robinson at this point of the draft process. And then Greg Robinson suddenly is the number 2 overall pick. You're thinking that Sean Coleman is at a similar path.
It could easily happen, and if it doesn't go quite as, the great thing about Robinson was that he went to the combine and he had these vine-like, insanely long arms and massive frame. I think he benched more than anybody else. He kind of ran faster than any of the other offensive tackles. It was just like a perfect workout for Robinson. So in the end, he ended up going very, very early because of the upside potential there. And although he's not quite lived up to that at the NFL, he's still very young. He's still got a chance to prove that he's very, very good. Sean Coleman is not necessarily going to have that sort of insane workout. He might do. It's hard to judge just watching him off tape, but I don't know if he's necessarily going to go that high. But if you want a name, if there's a Seahawks fans, a lot of them, Kenny, they come on the blog and they say, offensive line, it's got to be an offensive line pick. The Seahawks need to improve the offensive line. Well, if you want a guy to really zone in on and sort of, okay, I'm going to watch some college football this weekend, who do I need to look out for? I would recommend the Auburn left tackle, Sean Coleman.
Number 8, you've got Paxton Lynch, as we talked about him early, and then you've dropped Jared Goff down to 27. How long do you think it'll be before, you're obviously, every time you do a draft, you realize that there could be things to change along the way. I mean, last time we didn't even talk about Sean Coleman. You saw him, and now here he is. But you still think that this is the way it'll be, if everything were to stay, like, let's say, in a vacuum. Other people right now, they're not talking about Paxton Lynch maybe as much. They're talking about Jared Goff in a way of being a top 5 pick. At what point do you think that they will start to see that Jared Goff is a fringe first rounder?
I don't know. It depends, because I think Jared Goff is. I mean, I don't want to badmouth anybody, but Jared Goff is kind of the darling of what is described as draft Twitter, which is kind of like an annoying term to describe people who talk about the draft a lot on Twitter. And draft Twitter, as it is, kind of latched onto Teddy Bridgewater and turned him into this like flawless prospect. And like when he went at the very last pick of the first round, the reaction by draft Twitter was, what an unbelievable dumb decision from the NFL to allow Teddy Bridgewater, the golden child, to fall as far as he did. Now, I think we're seeing from Bridgewater that he has some limitations. Minnesota's winning kind of in spite of his play. I think he's throwing more interceptions than he is throwing touchdowns right now. He's okay, but he's not quite exceptional. I think that Jared Goff is going to end up being kind of like the poster child for draft Twitter this year. And he throws some very pretty passes, but for me, he's a bit too much like a Brock Osweiler type. And he went in the top end of round 2. I think teams they'll like Goff, but they'll not love him. And that's why I think he maybe goes a little bit later.
Yeah, Teddy Bridgewater, 5 games, he's thrown 3 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions, pass rating of 80.4. And I think that while we spend a lot of time talking about Ryan Tannehill or, other guys of similar maybe ability or stature and draft talk, first rounds, I don't think that a lot of people are giving Teddy Bridgewater maybe the amount of criticism that he could be, deserve right now. I think it's one of those same things along the lines of Christian Ponder, where they were winning and they went to the playoffs. I mean, they had to, at that point, he was hurt. And then it sort of exposed itself and says, oh, yeah, we can't actually win with this guy long term. Teddy Bridgewater is 23 years old. There's plenty of time for him to get better. I did want to ask you about a player that has emerged in the last 2 weeks. 5th-round pick Stephon Diggs was a 5th-round pick out of Maryland. He's only played in 2 games, but he's got 13 catches for 216 yards. He's already among the leaders for rookies just based on 2 games. I noticed that when he was a freshman at Maryland, he was a superstar. What do you know about Diggs? Is he going to be a big steal, or does he still have some limits?
Well, he had the potential to be, like a prospect who had some chances, because he was a huge recruit, if I remember, from when Maryland got him, and a big 5-star recruit. And it never really quite worked for him in college, and that's partly because Maryland never had an offense to speak of. He still made some big plays in the passing game and the return game. I think that looking at him, he was kind of someone that you would say, okay, the Seahawks are going to draft a kick returner. It's going to be one of Ty Montgomery or Tyler Lockett or maybe Stephon Diggs. And obviously they went for Lockett in the end. But Diggs has got, incredible speed, natural playmaking ability, and he just never really put it together in college. And I think there were a couple of sort of minor character issues with him as well. Nothing serious, but just things that maybe led him to fall. Now, they've got a chance in Minnesota to get a bit of a steal here. He's had a really good game at the weekend, and I've had a chance to look at some of his highlights. It looks really sharp. But there's an issue with the Minnesota passing game in general, and that it is so inconsistent. And Teddy Bridgewater's spreading it around, but it's a bit like Seattle. There's no sort of one target that week after week after week is going to get all a load of shots at this. It wouldn't surprise me if Diggs had a catchless game next week, and then the following week had another 120-yard game. I think that's the way it's going to be for a while as they try and work this out. Obviously, a very run-heavy team, but Diggs has got something to him, and he has a chance. He has that sort of 5-star recruit background. It's kind of why, when you first see, this is something that I generally do when you sort of watch someone in college and you think, hey, he looks really good, especially at receiver or running back. I like to go back and see if they were like a 4 or 5-star recruit coming out of college, because it kind of confirms they've got that natural athleticism. That's basically what they're being judged on at high school, is how much of an athlete they are, how special they look in that sort of level. So if they've kind of got that to them and it kind of confirms what you're seeing on the tape, you can kind of he's starting to sort of form an opinion that this guy could have something about him. And Stefan Diggs had all of that as he was going into the NFL.
Yeah, and that's what I thought, when doing a little bit of research on Sean Coleman, just seeing, oh, look, this is a guy was considered to be extremely talented at one point. That's sort of the same thing that, like we've talked about in the past with other recruits and other players and draft picks that, you can see that there's just a certain thing that you're born with and there's a certain thing you work at. And a lot of those top 100s that you go back and you look at, you see probably most of these guys were born with something, because in high school you can get by on pure athleticism. You just can't get by. Some people can get by with it in college, but not many. Very few can get by in the NFL. You could talk maybe about a Percy Harvin type or something like that. But again, that's a very small, almost unidentifiable number of people. So you will be shocked if you go back and look at some top 100 lists at some of the names that you will never have recognized in your entire life that were top 10 in the entire country out of 10,000 athletes. That never made it, and then there will be guys that weren't looked at all that are, J.J. Watt or whatever. So that is my final thought on that. Rob, any final thoughts?
Well, I just hope that next week, if the Seahawks go to 2-5, then we may have to start seriously considering doing like a proper mock draft, just to cheer everybody up, because there's a bit of a gap between the Thursday night game and the Dallas game. I sincerely hope the Seahawks can get back into it this week. Is there any better way to sort of restart a season with a win in San Francisco against the old enemy? No, let's just go and do it this week. If not, though, I'll make the confirmation now that if the Seahawks do lose and go to 2-5, we'll have a mock draft next week, a proper mock draft, probably with the Seahawks in the top 10 or 15, and we'll make it interesting. We'll try and sort of lift the spirits among Seahawks fans.
Yeah, I don't even feel like 2-5. It's not even one of those. It's a really weird year with the records, because there's 5 undefeated teams. Because there's 5 undefeated teams, there's also a lot of really, 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 really bad teams. So even being 2-5. I think once you actually start to work out the rankings and where that draft order is, I mean, right now you've got the Chiefs and Jags and Ravens and Lions all at 1-5. Nobody has no wins, but then 2-4 includes the Seahawks, the Niners, the Chargers, the Titans are 1-4, the Texans are 2-4, the Browns are 2-4, the Dolphins are 2-3. The Redskins are 2-4, the Bears are 2-4, the Saints are 2-4, the Bucks are 2-3, the Eagles are 2-3. So even if they lost this week, I still feel like there could be 15 teams ahead of them. So it's not really a good year to tank unless you're going to really, 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 really tank. I feel like not that it's ever a good year to tank, but right now in the middle of the season, being 2-5, you might still be like, how can that not be one of the worst records in the NFL? And it seems like the type of year where there's just going to be a few teams. Like, that's why I think that 9-7 maybe gets you into the playoffs. 10-6, I think definitely should get you into the playoffs. But when you talk about, I think there's going to be some teams that are 14-2, 15-1, 13-3, and then I think there's going to be a bunch of teams that are 3-13, 4-12, 5-11. So I don't think that the Seahawks, it gives them more of an opportunity to make the playoffs as a wild card. But also, I think there's going to be a big fat gap and like just a big muddled mess of tiebreakers and poor records in that top 14 picks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And maybe just a final thought to end with that. Two things. One, the Giants won a Super Bowl going 9-7.
Mm-hmm.
That's one, and that's a recent Super Bowl. It was Eli Manning's, I think it was his second title, maybe the first title. And the other thing is that if I went to the Dallas game in Seattle last year and was very disappointed to have attended such a horrifying defeat, and then the following week back in the UK watched us lose to St. Louis, and if you'd have said that from that point onwards the Seahawks were going to go 9-1 to finish the season, I wouldn't have believed it. And that is what this team has got in its locker, is that even at this point now, at 2-4, if the Seahawks won every game between now and the end of the season, you wouldn't be surprised, really. And if maybe it's not every game, if it's 9-1, 8-2, they've got that potential. And whenever they've got that, they've still got a chance. Even if I kind of feel like they have to win this week just to turn the corner. But even then, they have a chance because the quality is there.
Right. I 100% agree. Some people don't want you to be optimistic out there on Twitter. They want someone to tell them everything's going to fall apart, but the Seahawks still have plenty of chances. So that's 3,000 NFL mock draft, and come back next week, Monday, for another episode.